Hey everybody, Jacob here with Electric String Player and PickupTest.com, and today I want to talk about amps. You know, of all of the questions that we get on our social media feeds and in our email box, what amp should I buy is often the most asked. Unfortunately, like most of these questions, there isn't one answer. And because we all have a different style of playing and play in different situations, there really isn't just one tool that's right for every job. I myself play through a small AER Compact 63, but to be honest, over the past year and a half, for 95% of my gigs, from small clubs to huge festival stages and arenas, I have gone completely amp-free, and I've never been more portable and more in control of my sound on stage. I'm going to break this video into two parts. In the first part, we're going to be discussing some specific principles to help you figure out if you even need an amp in the first place. You might be surprised here. Now, because we're not sponsored and we're not a shop or a manufacturer that's trying to sell you something, it doesn't really make sense to talk about specific brands here. That's way too subjective anyway. And in the second part of the video, I'm going to give you 5 big tips to parse through the marketing and technical speak that are often associated with buying an amplifier, to simplify things and help give you some powerful principles so that you, as a string player, can make the best decision for whatever your situation, your playing style, your rig might be. Okay, so let's get started. So let's talk about some of the cons of using an amp. The first con is that every amp colors your tone and adds a bunch of extra variables in terms of how it changes your sound. For most of us, we would be in much better shape just controlling the sound from our pedal board, and you can get a small preamp pedal to do this. We did an amazing video about these preamp pedals, and there's a blowout of every single one on the market, from features to how they sound, that's already up on the Pickup Test. I would encourage you to check that out. No matter what style you play or how you're amplifying, that's the heart, in my opinion, of any good string player's rig on stage. It is true that some players actually like the extra color that their amps add to their sound, but for 98% of string players that we work with, when they talk about a good sounding amp, what they're actually talking about is an amp that sounds like just a louder cello or violin or viola, not the sound of their violin, cello, or viola coming through a speaker, right? And so, to me, adding that extra color is usually problematic and definitely makes things a lot more difficult to control when you go into different acoustic environments. The second downside of an amp is that it makes you a lot less portable. Now, for cellists, we need to go at least with an 8-inch speaker, and even though we're in an era where there are some amazingly efficient, loud, feature-packed amps that are very light, amps definitely take up a lot of space. And if you're a cellist that's already carrying your instrument, maybe a pedal board, music stand, it's definitely extremely inconvenient to be lugging an amp around as well. And in some cases, if you're going with a bigger amp, can be a real backbreaker. This isn't as big of a deal with violinists, but it can still be an issue. The third con is that amps can really increase your stage footprint. Now, imagine you're playing on smaller stages that are pretty packed, and you play with a band. I'm not talking about like an acoustic duo. I mean where there are a bunch of dudes competing for that space on the stage. A lot of the stages in LA are like that. The amp not only takes up a whole bunch of room, and remember, you can't, if you're a cellist or violinist, really keep it at your feet, because then the sound isn't really going up into your ears, right? And you're trying to monitor yourself. So some cellists put the stand on a chair behind them. Then you're talking about really taking up a lot of space that may or may not be there. And that can really be a problem. Having your amp close to you in a crammed situation brings us to con number 4, which is that amps do not play well with microphones. Even the most feedback resistant ones are going to feedback pretty readily if you need to crank it in a live situation and if it's pretty close to you. Now that's a major issue, again, for a lot of us because so many string players are relying on a microphone in their playing, or maybe in some cases blending a microphone with a piezo pickup. And while there are a bunch of amps on the market, particularly acoustic amps, which we'll talk about in the next section of this video, do offer support for microphones and allow you to plug in a mic and even power it with phantom power if your mic needs 48 volts, that doesn't mean they're not going to feed back, and feed back a lot. In other words, where you play, how portable you need to be, how you use your amp to hear yourself, and whether you use a mic are all really important factors in deciding whether you should go with an amp or not. So let's talk about a few of these scenarios where using an amp really is not the best option and what might be a better solution in those cases. First off, if you play medium to large theaters or club type venues. First off, if you play Number one, if you play medium to large theater or club venues, almost all of these are equipped with pretty decent monitoring systems. These are usually in the form of the wedge-shaped full-range monitors that are pointed back at the performers. These are generally designed to be full range and to be fairly flat response. In other words, to reflect accurately what you're sending from your pedal board. This greatly reduces your setup time and the hassle of dealing with your amp in a different stage space and in a different acoustic situation. Now, not every monitor speaker is perfect or amazing, but these days they tend to be a lot more uniform, and it gives the monitor man, the guy that's working at the front of house, control over your sound and volume if something goes wrong, like you start feeding back uncontrollably. That's not the type of thing you want to deal with when you're on stage, and it's a big extra bonus to just going to the house and plugging in direct. Another situation where you definitely would not want an amp is if you're playing large arenas. In those types of situations, even the guitarists and the bassists usually aren't going to have an amp on stage. They're going to be using these. These are my Sensophonic in-ear monitors, and these are custom molded to my ears, but they don't have to be in your case. There's a wide range of them available, and if you want to learn more about these types of monitoring solutions, we have a great video about headphones that I'll link to below. There's just way too much ambient sound in a large space for you to be dealing with an amp. And most importantly, you need to make sure that you can hear everyone else when you may be very, very far away. So it makes an amp-based rig kind of pointless. There's also the genre of practice amps, which are small amps designed for your practice room or the living room in your apartment. I own a couple of these and have owned a few in the past, but in general, I don't think they're really worth it. You can use a really good pair of headphones or in-ear monitors and get similar results with even better isolation for those late nights, particularly if you want to put a mute on your acoustic or you play a solid body instrument. A few situations where you would definitely want to use an amp would include busking, outdoor gigs, coffee house gigs, any situation where the amp is not just there to help you hear yourself better and louder, but is also there for the audience, where there's no sound guy or any type of house system. Those are obvious examples, right, where you do need an amp if that's the type of playing you do. Another situation where amps are really helpful is if you're playing with a small acoustic ensemble and everyone is using a small amp to monitor themselves. Amplified string quartets is a great example of this. Also, if you play in maybe a gypsy jazz type situation and you just need a small amp to make yourself a little bit louder, and this is the important part, all of the other members of the band are playing at very low volumes as well, so it's just a small little boost to your basic acoustic tone. Those are situations where amps can be pretty helpful. Another situation specific to us cellists is if you're doing a lot of faux bass playing, rhythm section type stuff. Think about Mark Summer in Turtle Island. He has a volume pedal that just turns the amp that he always has with him on stage on only when he's doing his pit stuff. There is something physically about feeling the vibration. In other words, having this kind of loud amplifier next to you. It doesn't have to be super loud, but having it next to you so that you can really like feel those notes more, that really helps with the timekeeping. And sometimes that's difficult to get from a monitor that is often a little bit further away from you on a typical club stage. Also, from a biofeedback perspective, most players that have solid body instruments that have no acoustic tone whatsoever usually have an amp. Okay, now I want to give 5 big tips for those of you that have decided that an amp is the right choice for you. These are things I wish I would have known when I was starting out on my journey, and they're specific to string players. Thanks for checking out this video. Click below to subscribe, leave your comments, any future videos you'd like to see, and please go to thepickuptest.com and check out our mothership site. And don't forget to check out our site, thepickuptest.com. It's the best resource for amplified string players on earth, and we just reached 1,500 subscribers. We'd love for you to be a part of that community. And it's jam-packed with audio and video reviews and resources for string players only that you won't be able to find anywhere else on the web. So come check it out.